Welcome back to another episode of the Profit Builder Unscripted. I am super excited about today's episode where I'm interviewing Ann Sheybani, and we're talking about how do you have the courage to take action in your life on something that maybe you've made a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, or maybe you've just let the head trash get in your way of moving forward. All right, let's jump in. I'm super excited to have my guest, Ann Sheybani, here today. And one of the things that, I have been asking people to do is to come on and share their stories about what is an event that's happened in your life that has influenced you in a powerful way, that has changed you, that has made your business or your life better in some way. And Ann, who I've known for years, was very generous to come on and share her story. So Ann, thank you for being here. Thanks for being a guest.
Well, thank you, Vicki. And I love being put in front of your audience and showing up on your platform. So
Oh, thanks.
I
Thanks.
appreciate the opportunity.
So you and I have known each other for about, I think we met in 2017 at Heroic Public Speaking. And then I had this book in me that I really wanted to write that I had not ever gotten traction on. And Ann is I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in just a second, but Ann is a book writing coach, and she's really good at what she does. And in the process of her coaching me and helping me and get my book written, I developed a great appreciation, respect, and affinity for you as a business person, as a human being. And so I'm just so glad to have you here and have you share your story. But so before you jump into that, though, would you just tell people a little bit about you and what you do, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, I think the expression book coach has so many different meanings, right? But a book coach is essentially somebody that helps draw out an idea and develop content around it and get a final manuscript that's ready for publication. So I specialize in prescriptive nonfiction, and prescriptive nonfiction is a book that solves a particular problem for a particular reader. So that's my sweet spot. So the people I tend to work with are business owners or speakers or coaches of some kind, service professionals that solve a particular problem for a particular type of person. And then I also help people publish the book, because it's great to have a polished manuscript, but you kind of have to have a home for it. So oftentimes I'm the home for it at the end of the journey too.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're really good at what you do. I got to tell you, I had hired other other book writing coaches before I met you. And you're so good at being able to draw out the essence of what it was that I really wanted to say. And yeah, it just made me feel really good about what the end result was. And graciously has the book behind her on the right side, me on the left side, but The Profit Bleed: How Managing Margin Can Save Your Contracting Business. I so appreciate you and your skill in being able to help people draw out story. So
Yeah,
speaking
can I just say one thing, that this book still sells stupidly well? This book still sells really, really well, which is something.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really happy about that. Well, I wrote it because I wanted to be able to contribute to people in another way, besides just working with them one-on-one or through my program, Contractors Collective program, or through my other services. Like, I really felt like that was a great way to be able to serve this industry and contribute and continue to be able to bring value. So I'm grateful for that, because it's serving the purpose for which it was intended. I didn't write the book to be a marketing tool. I really wrote the book to make a difference. So I'm so glad that it does. That feels really good. All right, so let's talk about you. So the question on the table is, what was an event in your life that has impacted you in a positive way, both either in your business or your life or both, that something that happened in your life that really changed you or changed your perspective or how you see things. And I'm going to let you go ahead and jump in, and I might ask you questions along the way, but
Ask questions
let's
because
see where it
like
goes.
I love this prompt. I think it's a great prompt, right? And it really does bring out great stories in people. So I would say one of those pivotal moments. My husband and I were at dinner, and we were someplace up in Stowe, Vermont, in the middle of nowhere on top of a mountain having dinner. And I had recently come back from an 8-week writer's retreat in which I was diligently polishing a draft of my memoirs. I came out of university with an MFA, and I'm this writer, and I'm devoting all of this time and attention to working on this book. And I've already spent 4 years, 6 years on this book because that's what we're trained to do with memoir or with novels. We're trained to just polish it, polish it, polish it for years on end. And while I had been gone, my husband decided while he was, holding down the fort that if she's going to have a book, I should have a book. And he'd gone to see Julie Julia and had seen how somebody who'd been writing a blog ends up getting a book deal. And he decides, that he was going to take this blog material and he was going to turn it into a book. And he started writing, and he saw a friend of his had gotten like a book published, and he'd made the link to this publishing house, and the publishing house said, absolutely, we'll publish your book. And so within this 8-week period of time, he had written his book, and shortly after that, he had published the book. And there we were in Vermont, walking around looking for these outdoor shops so he could sell his book because there was a related tie to outdoor shops. And we were talking about this whole, where are we going to put the book and how's that going to work? And up comes this woman who had overheard some of our conversation at the dinner table. And she came up to him and she said, excuse me, I don't mean to be eavesdropping, but are you an author? And he just all puffs up his chest. And he said, why, yes, I'm an author. And the entire time I'm sitting there like, this schmo has just spent 8 weeks writing a book, and now he's an author. He's got this book. And the woman immediately, after she finishes fawning over him, asks him if he would come and speak at her school to her audience about his book. And at the time, this was a real shift for me, because I suddenly saw how having a book, regardless of what's between the pages out there, was an instant credibility booster.
Mm.
It gave him instant authority, and it gave him kind of the leg up to begin speaking and then to begin coaching and to turn that book into a business. And I would say his business was at the very beginning allowing yourself to free yourself from the golden handcuffs and create a business that you love, create a life that you love. And at the time, after I got over the jealousy that I felt and the horror that anybody could be that, not like lack discernment of any kind, I recognized that I had a niche market, because I'd gone from training for memoir and novels. I was running a writing workshop where we were studying craft, and everybody in the writing workshop was working on novels or memoir, personal essays. And the expectation was they were going to take 5 years, 8 years of puttering on something.
Mhm.
And then the quick hit books that you create in 8 weeks. And they give you something. They give you a boost of legitimacy for a while, and people read it or they don't read it, right? But that there's something in between, and that in between is, how do you write a book that captures story, that captures narrative, that brings the reader in, that takes them on a journey, that allows them to fix a problem, but also get to know the author as a human being, as a trusted guide. So that naturally, by the time they finish the book and they get the first solution to the problem, that if they want to go deeper, it would make perfect sense.
Can I just ask you a question though? So it
Yeah.
sounds like, so when I listened to the story about you, here you were at this 8-week retreat and thinking that the thing you had to do was to really work hard and have it take a really long time. Like that whole narrative that you're describing about it's got to be hard and it's got to take a long time. It sounds like there was something when you saw how Walt wrote a book in 8 weeks and then how he monetized it and really had it like that it didn't have to be this big, long, difficult, arduous journey. Like, what, how did that change when you saw that? How did it change how you approached A, your own writing, and B, how you work with people? Right. Like, so there's a, when you first described this story to me, I was like, what I heard was, wow, like it really had you think about this differently than you had before. What is that? Like what changed for you in your approach at that point to your own writing and then also how you work with people?
Yeah. So I would say I still have the MFA in me. So I still work on an art project. I'm going to call it an art project. Like I see my memoir as something where every word has to be right and it just all has to be shaped right. So I play with that. But I also put together a really, really good how-to book on how to write a book. And I probably put that book together maybe in 6 months based on a whole bunch of other content that I had from teaching and from coaching and whatnot. And I pushed that book forward because that book served as a gateway into my world for a lot of people. So for a lot of people who couldn't afford to hire me one-on-one or join any of my larger cohorts, writing cohorts. That book could solve problems. That book could impact a lot of people. That book could help a lot of people who I couldn't normally help, on a daily basis. And that served as a great gateway for me. So when I'm working with people, we're always looking at the time frame. We're looking at their need to tell a lot of personal story or a little personal story that there's a recognition that there's a big I would say there's a range of requirements individuals have. There are those who want to become Brene Brown, the next Brene Brown, and they recognize that that's going to take a bit more time. And there are those that don't have a particular interest in being a Brene Brown, but they do want to have a book that gets read from cover to cover, that gets handed out to other people, that legitimately helps people. Because we're probably all aware of some of these books out there that they're not readable or they're just all over the place. They're innocent people who don't know how to put together a book. So I would say it's a healthy appreciation of what a client actually is looking for when I'm working with them, not being a stickler to, we need this to look like War and Peace or Gone with the Wind, because I would say early in my career, I was probably a bit more of a stickler. And an appreciation for really what does bring people into their world, what stories really do bring folks into the world, and what that framework, what the framework is, and recognizing that sometimes the framework is what has to stand out and less narrative, and sometimes it's more narrative, less framework. So I don't know if that answers the question or if it confuses
So
it.
let me ask this question. So as I'm listening to you, it sounds like it shifted your perspective and how you work with people, instead of looking at like everything has to be like this grand thing.
Yeah.
It started to shift your thinking and your approach to how you're working with somebody, and look at, all right, like, what is your goal, right? Rather than, well, here's how you write a book. You asked a different question. You asked the question, what's the purpose of your book? What do you want to get out of it? What's your intent?
What's your time frame?
What's your time frame? Good. Yeah. Like, so that started to alter how you served people. And as I think I'm also hearing you say is, you could serve more people and you could serve them better when you could understand more what their goals were, and when you could get unattached to or let go of this whole thing of, it has to take a long time, it has to be difficult, it has to be like, really deep and researched and ground through and edited, and and I know you do all those things, but there's different levels to do it. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah,
Like,
you're hearing that correctly. I was just considering, was working with this really, really busy, very, very successful entrepreneur who had great taste in reading. So he loved what I would call big idea books that are heavily researched, that are generally written by a journalist, that, that they're the index in the back, the bibliography is usually half the size of the book. Like, he
yeah,
loved his books, and he envisioned, having his book in the bookshelves of Barnes and Noble or at Hudson News. So his vision for what he was after was grand. And this is a guy who is so used to making money, taking an idea and monetizing it, usually within 3 to 4 weeks, that the idea of needing to slow down and write this kind of book, which is fairly involved and requires writing skill, and do the research and the footnotes and the endnotes, like the reality of what it would take to have this kind of book that he fantasized about was just, the two realities didn't mix. So it's a matter of sitting down with someone like this and saying, well, here's the constraints. And if this isn't going to serve your purpose and it's going to require too much time, it's the wrong vision. So let's create a new vision, and let's compromise. And the compromise was appropriate for the situation,
yeah,
because until you know what something is required to write, like, your book is a lot more complicated than a quick how-to. It's a story-driven narrative with a framework. And that took time and precision. A lot of people don't want to take the time or think through that stuff. They want something quicker. And there are easier books. There's a how-to book, for instance, or a quote book, or any number of genres that are just easier to manage.
two things occur to me as I'm listening to you. So one of them is, I'm thinking about, like, so my audience is construction industry, right? And I'm thinking about, there's a definitely an artistic element to being a general contractor, a subcontractor, a carpenter, a metal worker, a designer, an architect. Like, there's this, what's my craft, right? What's the thing that I do? And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, how valuable in asking more questions to find out what somebody really wants. And then two things I heard as I'm listening to you. One is, asking more questions to find out, does it really have to be my ideal, opus? Or is it that they really just want something, down and dirty, or something more simple, right? Which may or may not mean that then they're your ideal client or not, right?
Yeah.
And then secondly, that if somebody wants an opus, but they don't want to spend the money or the time doing it, to be able to bring that dose of reality to them. Yeah, just bring that dose of reality, or to like be able to have that conversation.
An
The other thing that,
Italian marble kitchen sounds awesome.
yeah,
Until
I
you
know.
start looking at the costs and the timeline, and then
I
it's like, maybe I don't want an Italian marble kitchen after
Yeah.
all.
I do
And it's
fantasize about those all the time, but yeah.
who doesn't?
So the other interesting thing for me as I'm listening to you is there's this book it's like almost a journal that I want to create. And I keep having this thought in the back of my head, like, oh, like it's not weighty enough. It's not like it's not substantial enough. It's not like, I don't know, whatever enough. And now I'm listening to you and I'm going, well, maybe that would be a really good thing to do. Maybe it doesn't have to be something big and significant. Cause then like I got a couple more books in me. I know that I just haven't like so this
Well,
conversation is good
I
for me.
love
It's a
I
good
love
reminder that like it doesn't have to be big and significant.
I love this conversation because, like being in the publishing world, I'm always watching trends. I'm always seeing what's selling and what's not selling, like what's rising and what's falling. And I was listening to this something that had shown up on Book Talk. It was somebody had created a journal about, I don't know, like getting in touch with your shadow side. And she'd written this journal, she'd self-published it, and she'd started promoting it, and people started buying this book. And somebody in her audience had bought this book and had used it and had gone ahead and created this entire business using this woman's book and crediting her the book, right? Crediting her IP.
Nice. Yeah.
This book had taken off. It was selling millions of copies. It's this simple journal book for getting in touch with your shadow side. And when a stranger is using it and seeing the value of it, then creating a business off of this,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's like it's mind blowing because again, not everything has to be dense. It doesn't have to be, thinking fast and slow, which, most of us can't ever get through because it's so heavily researched and science backed.
Do you
So
think go ahead.
no, I just like simple works sometimes. It really
Yeah.
does. The
Yeah.
idea, the idea needs to be hooky, and the problem needs to be something that people identify with having.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good advice. I'm just thinking as I'm listening to you too, it's like, is it that um even the whole thing about that it's got to take a long time or it's got to be difficult to write a book, or sometimes just to do anything that's a new project that we're about to undertake. I'm just listening and I'm thinking, is part of what holds us back also is that we think it needs to be perfect. That whole thing. If it's not perfect, then I can't put it out there. Or like that fear of, well, that fear of it's not going to be good enough, but also that fear of what if people don't like it? What if people don't buy it? Even like, and I see that like even when it comes to sales, right? And doing sales and putting ourselves out there. Um, are we engaging or are we holding back because of our
So
fear
I,
of
I it's
rejection or like not being
all
good enough or
all of that
yeah,
comes to a head because when you put your ideas and your opinions and your framework and your approach to life and business on the page in black and white, not everyone is going to agree with you. Not everyone is going to go, oh my God, you're brilliant. You know, and it's really hard. Like even if you're out on social media and you put up a post and somebody invariably who can remain somehow anonymous will weigh in and say horrible things about your idea or about you or about your family. I mean, there are people out there that are pretty toxic.
yeah,
And putting a book out there, like, what if you get a bad review? Or what if somebody finds your typo? Or what if somebody sees that there's a mistake in there? It's a challenge, particularly if you're a polished human being. Perfectionists love me because I'm a recovering perfectionist myself. And I have these
yeah,
conversations all the time throughout the process, and particularly during the publishing process where things are getting refined and things have to be right. And, it's go time. It's a very emotional period for people.
Mm.
because the fear of being found wanting is a terrifying feel. The fear of being rejected or criticized, and will it happen? Probably.
Yeah.
Probably someone is going to have something snarky to say.
Yeah.
And it's hard to remember all of the people that you actually help. The people who will come up to you and say, like, I feel so much less alone, or I feel like you get it, or I feel like I've got a shot now. Like, I see what the problem is, and I didn't see it before. And I now have a direction or a focus so I can fix that. Like, we forget about the people we're helping
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's human nature to focus on the snarky dude,
Yeah.
out in the audience
Yeah. I
who.
can completely relate to that. I think, I had gestured at writing that book for 6 years before I met you and really sat down and got serious about writing it. And I think that you helped me bridge that gap of getting over myself in some ways, like getting over that. I had this conversation in the back of my head of, people don't really want to read your crap. And you really helped me get beyond that. And um yeah, so thank you for that. And I completely relate to that. I completely relate to our fear of putting ourselves out there sometimes because we are afraid of being rejected. It's interesting. This conversation would be surfacing this way right now because I'm in the midst of reading the book, The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. And the third agreement, no, it's the second agreement. Second agreement is don't take anything personally, and it's so hard for us to do. And anyway, it's kind of, but it's a good rule of thumb, right? Like other people's stuff is their stuff, and not everybody's going to love our stuff, and not everybody's, it's not going to resonate with everybody, but we do it for those people who we know it will resonate for, the people who it will stick for, even for me doing this podcast, right, in this new format, and just like being a little bit nervous and going, well, you know what, it's going to stick with some people and it's not going to others, or you know so yeah, I appreciate you are really good at helping people get beyond that mind chatter, that negative self-talk.
That's the thing about, writing to our people. Most of the time, we have familiarity with the subject that we're writing about, right? And like we get what the fears are, we know what they look like. Like I share them. I share the fears that my clients have. So there's a deep appreciation for them, there's a respect for them, and there's always like, how do we get around the fear? How do we keep the fear at bay? How do we make it, how do we make the project, small enough, tenable enough, doable enough so that people's energies or their emotions don't take over? That's the role of a contractor.
So what advice would you give somebody? Because you deal with this all the time, right? Having to get people get past their head trash. What what advice would you give somebody? Because I think it is fear. I think it's fear of rejection, fear of, not being enough, not good enough, I need to be perfect, like all that, right? What, somebody listening to this who is about to embark or wants to do something that they haven't done, or wants to, is making something more complicated than they need to, who's holding back doing something that they want to do, what piece of advice would you have to help them,
I
like, take
think,
the next step to get beyond it?
yeah, I think I'll go back to my original story of sitting in that restaurant with Walt, my husband, and thinking to myself, hey, I'm the writer and he's got the book. And I can't tell you the number of people who have finally gotten off the fence, and people will sit on the fence for years. I have had people, being in conversation with people for a couple of years before they finally decide to jump off the fence and do something about it. And invariably, somebody that they feel with lesser credentials or lesser credibility or, less know-how has blindly gone and written a book and is getting all of the acclaim and the attention and the impact that they want to have. And the realization that if somebody like that can do it, like, why on earth can't I do it? So sometimes jealousy or envy is a great motivator. It's a great motivator, like, which one of us wants to admit to feeling that way, right? And then, like, when you see what it does for other people, and part of it is, like, somebody's traveled that path, somebody close nearby in your arena has done it, and you recognize that it's doable, and you can see the benefits before your eyes. And until then, it's theoretical. Until then, it's somebody selling you on it, selling you on the benefits of this or this or this. You see it without other people's input, which allows you, I think, to kind of make a decision for yourself. So I think that's part of it. And I also think that, like, if you've started a business, none of us knew what we were doing when we started a
Mhm.
business.
Yeah.
We're just, like, so blind. We just went in it, and somebody, like, for me, I would always somebody would say, "Hey, you wanna do this with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, all right." Just naive, and then it just grows on itself. Like, I think allow yourself to be a little naive and allow yourself to be crappy at it and allow yourself to have a guide or to work with somebody who can show you how to be good so you get better faster. And I do think, like, it takes me an awful long time to drop the feeling that I should be fantastic at everything I touch, even if I've not practiced it.
Yeah.
And that's about as arrogant as it gets, to feel like you have to be good at everything. And I think to allow yourself to be a beginner and not be fantastic and to see how it plays out, I just think those people get ahead a lot faster.
Yeah. Ah, gosh, I really appreciate what you just said. Even as I was listening to you, I'm like, oh yeah, like give ourselves a little bit of grace. Um, and yeah, it's not, yeah, perfection is never the goal. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That was good. That was good. And thank you. I love this conversation. I always love talking with you. If somebody is listening to this and they're like, I want to talk to Ann some more. I have a book in me or whatever that I want to write. How do they get a hold of you?
I would have them reach out to me at annsheybani.com, and I'm sure they're gonna see how my name is spelled on the podcast episode. So it's Ann at annsheybani.com. You're always gonna get me there.
Okay. We will make sure to put that in the show notes and share.
That'd be awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been awesome. What a fun conversation. And I hope that all of you are watching and listening. I hope you've enjoyed something in this conversation that you can take away and maybe create a little bit more grace and space in your life for doing the thing that you want to do and having more courage to make something maybe a little easier, a little simpler, a little less complicated. And yeah, and then those just words come back to me again, like just giving yourself a little bit more grace. So thanks for everybody for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Profit Builder Unscripted.